Welcome to the second video on Too Cool, Cost of Ownership and Overall Equipment Efficiency Software. Too Cool is a cloud-based solution that helps engineering, finance, and marketing better understand the cost structure of steps in their manufacturing and assembly processes, or the impact of their equipment and materials on their customers' operations.
Based on what I've learned from working with TurboCool, I have collected more data. Can you show me where these new data are entered into the more complete model forms?
In getting started with Too Cool, we built a model using TurboCool and saved the model in a new database. In this video, we will look at the individual inputs from TurboCool and where they were placed in the main model, and proceed to update and add additional data to enhance the model. This is where we left off with the previous video. Let's start by taking a look at each of the inputs in TurboCool. Throughput capacity is a measure of the stopwatch throughput of the equipment in the process step. Other factors will detune the throughput to an actual running value. As we mentioned last time, the volume requirements input can either be used to determine the number of pieces of equipment that are needed to meet the production demand, or by setting it to 0, tell Too Cool to determine the lowest possible cost of ownership given all the other constraints. We call this single system fully loaded. Availability is a measure of what percent of the total time the equipment is running production. Equipment costs are all the depreciable costs, and recurring costs are all the costs associated with running the process except for any scrap costs. Life of equipment lets us know how long the process will be run, and depreciation method gives us a time over which the equipment costs will be depreciated. In TurboCool, the depreciation method is set to straight line, but that can be changed in the main model. Equipment yield is the percentage of the product that enters this step that is passed along to the next step. Reasons for loss would be breakage or gross misprocessing, where you immediately recognize the product is defective. Parametric limited yield loss is a measure of the percent of the product that has some manufacturing parameter out of specification. Normally, these defects are caught at a later inspection step. Value of incoming unit is the accumulated manufacturing cost, not the sales price, up to and through this point in the process, and is used to cost equipment yield loss. Value of completed unit is the accumulated manufacturing cost, again not the sales price, up to the point where parametric losses are caught. Let's take a look at the detailed model areas that correspond to the inputs in TurboCool. Throughput at capacity is available in the input form called Throughput under Model-Specific Data. That is the input section dealing mostly with inputs that are associated with the equipment and materials used in the process. You will notice a second input called Theoretical Throughput that is only used in overall equipment efficiency, which will be covered in a later video. Let's change those two values to 300 and 400 respectively. Volume requirements is available in the input form called Volume Metrics under Factory Parameters. That section covers inputs that are mostly under the control of the factory owner. Since we entered a 0 for volume requirements in TurboCool, this form is set to Single System Fully Loaded. There are two other inputs on this form: lot size, which is used to allocate costs on a per unit basis when they're entered on a per lot basis, and redo rate, which says that there's a certain percentage of products running through this step that are recycled. This isn't the same as yield loss or scrap, and only takes away from available throughput. We'll add a redo rate of 2%. Availability is more complex, since it could be impacted by scheduled and unscheduled maintenance, engineering time, standby time, and test time. To simplify inputs for TurboCool, the lost hours for availability are input into scheduled maintenance. These lost hours can be redistributed to other categories as data becomes available. Let's start by reducing the number of scheduled maintenance hours and adding inputs for mean time between failure and average response time. Next, we'll add data based on the factory parameters. Equipment cost is primarily the sum of all depreciable costs, which are available on the original cost form. This lump sum can be further divided amongst the other inputs on that form: transportation cost, installation cost, and other depreciable costs. There are also other costs that are considered equipment costs but are not depreciable. These include moves and rearrangements, environmental safety and health permits, initial system qualification, floor space costs, and initial training. We'll skip all but the floor space costs, which has two components: the operating footprint of the equipment and the cost of floor space. Non-scrap related recurring costs again cover a broad number of possible inputs. So TurboCool just places all the costs in a single input under supplies and consumables. Other recurring cost areas include utilities, waste disposal, other materials, personnel, support services, and maintenance. The maintenance section allows for the input of replacement parts costs and warranty and service contract conditions. Let's make some changes to the maintenance inputs. These can be used to determine if a service contract is more cost-effective than doing in-house service, or, for suppliers, a quantitative way to set service contract pricing. First, let's add repair parts costs. TooCool will determine if this cost is used depending on the warranty and service contract conditions. Now we'll add headcount for both scheduled and unscheduled maintenance, making sure to be consistent with other inputs. The warranty will be 12 months and 1 shift of unscheduled maintenance, including repair parts. Lastly, we will use 1 shift of contract coverage after the warranty period. Life of equipment and depreciation method can both be found on the financial parameters form. On this form, you can also change the depreciation method from straight line. This section falls under the general category of administrative rates, which covers floor space costs, labor rates, inflation, production schedules, and other factors previously mentioned. Equipment yield is found on the yield form. This form has additional inputs if you have selected the wafer fab manufacturing type. We'll change equipment yield from 100% to 99.5%. Parametric limited yield loss is on the process data form. Again, this form has additional inputs if you have selected the wafer fab manufacturing type. Let's update this field to 0.5%. Lastly, the values of the incoming and completed units are found in the administrative rates section on the other costs form. While there are numerous other input areas that can be used if needed, the informational input form should be considered essential. This is information that will be included at the top of all reports and can assist in finding the model of interest in a database containing a large number of models. Once you are satisfied with the input data, you can view the results in a number of reports and charts. Reviewing the management report shows us that the added data has changed our cost of ownership value from 0.0588 to 0.1449. As you can see, most of that cost difference is coming from our yield loss, and more specifically, driven primarily by our parametric limited yield loss. The last thing you will need to do is save any updates you've made to the model. To save the model before exiting TooCool, just click on the diskette icon in the upper left of the button bar. Your model is now more accurate and ready for even more refinement.